Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this panel at Virtual SpyCon. It's great to be here. It's a pity we can't all be together in Atlanta, but this is congrats to the SpyCon team for putting this together and allowing us to get together and talk about one of our favorite subjects, spies. On this panel, we're going to talk about spies, but not James Bond. I usually end up on James Bond panels or moderating James Bond panels, but today we're actually going to broaden the conversation a bit and talk about the general super spy genre and some of our favorite spies, be they spoofs or just inspired by Bond or inspired by the other spies. So with me, I have Jared, Van, and Bill, and I would let's kick off and go around the table and introduce yourselves. I'm just going in the order I can see them on my Zoom feed. So Jared, do you want to start off by introducing yourself and give us your spy bona fides?
Sure. I'm Jared Albrecht, known as the Yard Sale Artist. I'm a comic book creator and writer and artist. And I produce a couple of podcasts over on Her Majesty's Secret Podcast Network, and I host a couple over there as well. Lifelong Bond fan. Only within the last couple of years have I dabbled into the where we're going on this panel, the influence stuff. The only thing else I have to add before I pass it on is if I had known that noted anti-Daltonite Van Plexico was going to be here, I might not have attended, but here we are.
Why didn't talk, Van? Do you want to pick up on that?
The anti-Daltonites. Wasn't that a religious sect in medieval England, Alan? They were condemned by Henry VIII and forced to go live in Newfoundland, I believe.
At first, I thought you were talking about the Mennonites, but like, oh no. Okay.
The anti-Daltonites don't ever ride on cello cases. It's against their religion.
No, they don't. No, they don't.
Wow, we're like developing an entire show here.
I know, right? Let's just keep going with
this. We have to actually do this. I'm sorry I'm wasting our time. No, I'm Van Allen Plexico, and I am the author of quite a few novels, including some crime novels that have some gunplay and action stuff going on. Alan and I will soon be working on a new book in that series. That would be the Harper and Salsa crime series. And yeah, I'm the, I guess, the executive producer or something of On Her Majesty's Secret podcast that both of these guys on either side of me here on my screen, at least, are in. We do various shows, including reviewing all the movies, and we're currently reviewing stuff like the Connery non-Bond movies Alan and I just did. That'll be coming up on Monday on our podcast. But yeah, so lots of Bond stuff. Yeah, I've watched Bond since probably, I mean, Diamonds Are Forever was the one I was watching on ABC when I was a little kid, and so yeah, I love it.
Bill?
My name's Bill Koenig. I run a blog called The Spy Command, which has been in service since 2008. I also have the Man from U.N.C.L.E. episode guide, which has been online since 1996 at multiple addresses. I've had to bump it a few times. And I'm on somewhat frequently on the James Bond and Friends podcast, but I've also had an occasional appearance on the Spybrary podcast. So I get around.
You do indeed, in the best possible way. And you and I are both members of the Ian Fleming Foundation,
right.
And we occasionally wield the odd wrench for those guys. So,
yeah, it's mostly like helping them, like, you want a drink?
All right, and I'm Alan Porter. I'm the author of James Bond, The History of the Illustrated 007. And as Van and Jared mentioned, I'm actually also on Her Majesty's Secret Podcast, co-host the movie reviews with Van and the Bond Music, 6 of the Best Shows with Jared, and also run a Bond-related feed on Twitter and a Man from U.N.C.L.E. related feed on Twitter for a project that has, I would say, been backburnered, but it's probably further than backburnered, but it's still ticking over in the background somewhere. So I really wanted to sort of, as I said earlier, expand this beyond Bond and talk about the general ones. I want to sort of kick off with Bill, because Bill has an almost encyclopedic knowledge of spy TV in the 60s, excuse me. And I know this panel is titled Spoofs, but not all of the things that came out in the 60s and were on 60s TV were spoofs. I mean, Ian Fleming was directly involved in the very early development of at least a couple of shows. Man from U.N.C.L.E. and Danger Man spring to mind. So I'd like to hear from Bill, sort of get an overview of the early days of the super spy genre from the sort of early 60s?
Well, we should first go to October of 1962 because, of course, as we all know, October 5th was the world premiere of Dr. No. But at the tail end of that month, October 29th to 31st, Ian Fleming met for 3 days in New York with a television producer named Norman Felton. Felton was British born but had immigrated to the US, and he was working out of MGM. And what happened was Fleming's Thrilling Cities book was coming out, and Felton was approached, can you make this into a TV show? And the book hadn't been published yet, but he got proofs of it, and he quickly read it. It's like, no, there's not a TV show that could be made out of this. But he had a meeting set up with like network executives, high-powered advertisers. So he goes into the meeting and he ad-libs a pitch. And like, so, you know, it's a breakfast meeting and like, see that person over there? Well, what if he were a spy and you didn't know it? And, you know, he like does this and like, they're quickly intrigued by this, but then somebody says, you know, if you could get Ian Fleming involved, this was an NBC person, you know, we would approve a series without even making a pilot. Just get Fleming involved. So that then precipitated the 3 days of meetings at the end of October. The problem was Felton and, you know, Felton was based in Los Angeles. Of course, Fleming was based out of London. So they meet halfway in New York. And essentially, Felton had a lot of trouble getting Fleming to like deal with the subject at hand. Fleming's like telling stories about his days, you know, during World War II and all sorts of stuff. So finally, to force the issue, Felton borrows a typewriter at his hotel. He types up a bunch of ideas and then he presents them to Fleming. And Fleming says, oh, these are pretty good. Can I have these? Like, no, you can't have these. These are mine. But so then Fleming says, well, let me look at these and I'll get back to you today. Because, you know, like they were like nearing the end of their time together for these meetings. And so then Fleming wrote handwritten notes on telegram blanks. And for, you know, those of you like, there used to be these things called telegrams that you like, if you needed to like contact somebody in a hurry, you like write up something on a telegram blank and Western Union would send it, and et cetera, et cetera. So there are these handwritten notes. Apparently Felton's idea was the hero would be called Edgar Solo. Fleming came back with Napoleon Solo. And as Felton years later told the story, well, why Napoleon? And supposedly Fleming replied, well, it goes good with Solo. And there were like, I've read photocopies of the blanks. They're really hard to read because Fleming had terrible handwriting. But, you know, there's some ideas for basically the you know, character traits for Solo and whatever. So, you know, that's when the meeting broke up. And then Fleming was never going to do the heavy lifting. So at the time, Felton was producing this very serious dramatic show called The 11th Hour, and his day-to-day producer was a guy named Sam Rolfe. And so like he hands this stuff off to Sam Rolfe to develop. As it turned out, Rolfe had once tried to pitch a show he called St. George and the Dragon, which was, you know, about an organization and all this. So essentially he reworked his St. George and the Dragon thing into a prospectus. And then it's like, Felton's like, oh, this is great. Can you give me more? And so like he expands it. So eventually there is like a roughly 40-page series proposal. And on the cover page, and Rolfe didn't know this, it says Ian Fleming Solo. And it lays out details about the Uncle organization and the characters. You know, Rolfe came up with additional characters, including the Russian agent Ilya Kuryakin. And, you know, it's like, anyway, eventually Fleming has to pull out of the project. This, you know, like I said, the meetings were in October of 62. By June of 63, Fleming is under pressure from Albert R. Broccoli and Harry Saltzman to like, we'd rather you like get out of this. And he does. And then in June of 63, he actually signs away his rights for the princely sum of £1 British. And so then, but during this entire time, Sam Rolfe has like been typing up ideas and, you know, probably like plots. And so it's like, okay, so NBC is like, okay, we like what you're doing, but you're going to have to do a pilot. So they did produce a pilot. The pilot was filmed in November 63. Then they got the idea, you know, if this doesn't sell, maybe we can do some additional scenes and we can release it as a movie, just like get some of our costs back. So there were additional scenes written up in early 64 and then filmed in early 64. And then anyway, it turns out the series gets sold and they were off to the races. So The Man from U.N.C.L.E. does have a direct connection to Ian Fleming. Interestingly, Ian Fleming Publications has disowned all of this. They will not acknowledge any of this, because back in 2013, remember, there was that continuation novel by William Boyd called Solo, and like the press releases, oh, this is great original title, and like they were like live streaming the reveal of the title, and like I'm like watching this on Twitter. I'm like, I couldn't believe it. It's like, guys, it's like your guy, Ian Fleming, worked on a show called Solo. This is not an original name. And I did some interesting tweets, and one of my Twitter followers got back to me and said, "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" And I replied, "I am laughing my head off at this. It's just, it was ridiculous." But anyway, that's life. So the show went on the air in the fall of 64, and I saw, that was my introduction into spy fandom. I saw my first Uncle episode in that fall of 64. It wasn't the very first episode, but pretty early on. And so I was actually an Uncle fan, and then I discovered James Bond, because in the fall of 65, NBC preempted Uncle to show The Incredible World of James Bond TV special. And that's what's like, whoa, this was a whole nother thing, a whole nother level, like, whoa. And so I actually saw then Thunderball was my first James Bond film sometime in the spring of 66. I know it came out at Christmas, but it was a few months later. Back then, movies didn't like roll out instantly in all markets. You know, there was like a gradual rollout. But anyway, so Uncle ran from 64 to early 68, 3.5 years. But yeah, it was big. It got me into the whole spy thing. And from then I, discovered Matt Helm, discovered, Mission Impossible, discovered all this other stuff. So that changed my life, I can say honestly.
What about things that were more sort of the humorous spoof thing? Like, the one that springs to my mind is Get Smart, or, to an extent, Wild West as well.
Yeah. Well, Get Smart has a fascinating backstory, which I did not know at the beginning, which was apparently, so by like 65, this production company, the head of the production company said, what are like two of the most popular things right now? Well, James Bond's popular, Inspector Clouseau is popular. What if you combine them? And so that was the beginning of Get Smart. And so then Mel Brooks and Buck Henry were hired to jointly write the script. And it was originally intended for ABC, the ABC network here in the States. But this one ABC executive, the things I've watched about this, they don't identify the guy. I think I know who it is. I think it's a guy named Tom Moore, who is the head of programming. He hated it because the punchline of the script was that, the villainous organization was Chaos, spelled K-A-O-S. And it was like Mr. Big. And of course, Mr. Big was a dwarf. That was the joke. And like this ABC guy hated this idea. He was like, oh, we are not going to have anything to do with this. And so then the story goes that Mel Brooks was at one of his hangouts in Hollywood, and a guy at NBC who knew him said, "Hey, Mel, what's the matter? What's going on?" "Oh, our pilot, it's like it's been rejected." And well, as it turned out, NBC had Don Adams under contract, and they were going to pay him until they could get a show for him. They said, well, send us the script. We'll take a look at it. The thing was, they call it pilot season. The normal production of pilots had already occurred, but they looked at the script. They said, we got to do this. So they freed up the money to film a late pilot for Get Smart. And the script was, Mel Brooks and Buck Henry retooled the script to work in Don Adams' bit, because things like Would You Believe and I Missed It by That Much were actually things from Don Adams' comedy act. So they worked that into the script. But my understanding is like Mel Brooks came up with the idea of the shoe phone, and Buck Henry came up with the idea of the cone of silence, where it's like, Maxwell Smart, we must have, insists on secrecy, and like the chief saying, really, Max, the cone of silence? And then, okay, and he flips the switch on the intercom, Hodgkins, lower the cone of silence. And so then cone of silence comes down, and of course they're trying to talk to each other and they can't hear each other. And then finally the chief finally hits the intercom again, Hodgkins, raise the cone of silence. And Hodgkins says, what? And then anyway, it's an inspired bit if you've never seen it. But anyway, the series sold, and they were on their way. So those were, and then the Wild Wild West was, okay, spies and cowboys. And so, all right. And originally they were like looking at, I believe it was Rory Calhoun was like a tall leading man, but for whatever reason, they ended up going with Robert Conrad, who was a much shorter but athletic guy, and Ross Martin was his sidekick. And actually, with the Wild Wild West, those are the most far out things. It's set in the 1870s, but in terms of just way out there stuff, I mean, like this is just one example. So at one point, it appears like scientists are being killed, but really their brains have been preserved. And so there's all this bank of brains of, preserved brains of scientists, who the villain is, is doing stuff with. And of course, also their arch nemesis was Dr. Lovelace, played by Michael Dunn, who also played Mr. Big in the Get Smart pilot. And, and in the first 3 episodes with Dr. Lovelace, his henchman was Voltaire, played by Richard Keel. So you have 7'2" Richard Keel with 3'9" or whatever he was, Michael Dunn. Like at one point, I remember one episode where Richard Keel is carrying Michael Dunn in his arms to get away. So it was a fantastic time. It was very much, lightning in a bottle kind of thing. And it just happened time and time again. And it was a great time. For people, old farts like me, it was a great time.
Was a great time, yeah. And of course, on my side of the Atlantic, we had Danger Man, which actually came out in 1960, which I think Fleming had some involvement with very early on. And of course, the Avengers, not the superhero Avengers, but the,
right, no,
Emma Peel, John Steed Avengers, or Kathy Gale, yeah.
Right, because over here, the Avengers didn't get over to the United States until 66, I think it was, or thereabouts.
Right.
And we didn't get it until Diana Rigg was in the show.
Yeah, so a lot of Bond connections there. You're talking about Richard Keel. Wasn't he also in the first episode of Man from U.N.C.L.E.?
Yes, he was. In fact, he was in the first episode, uncredited. He was a henchman. Solo is running around the factory of the villain. And then he was in another episode in the first season as a henchman. Different parts, but So he's in 2 actually.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, I'm going to sort of jump, as we're talking about the 60s, I'm going to jump to Jared now and put him on the spot, because Jared owes me, because he made me watch OK Connery for the second time around.
Oh no.
Okay, Connery. Hey.
See, so I'm going to make Jared talk about 2 movies, because he made me watch OK Connery, so I made him watch Matt Helm. So I want to get his views and feelings on these 2 spoof spin-off type things for spy movies from the 60s. As somebody who's relatively new to the whole spin-off part of spy fandom.
Yeah, I'm definitely new to it. Over on our Majesty's Secret podcast, we had a show called Rookie Agents, where we took two friends from my life, along with my brother, who's not a rookie. He's a big Bond fan as well. But we took these two guys who'd never seen the Bond films through every one of them, and we were going to sync up with the release of No Time to Die. Well, that was like 2 years ago.
How that turned out.
So then we said, well, what are we going to do to kill time? I said, well, let's start watching some of these spin-off films. And I pitched to the group, hey, I'd seen this movie called OK Connery, a.k.a. Operation Kid Brother, a.k.a. It's got like 6 or 7 titles. But anyway, I'd seen it before on Mystery Science Theater 3000, one of my favorite TV shows, you know, where they lampoon and make fun of, you know, quote unquote bad movies. And I thought, well, that'd be fun to watch. So I pitched it to Alan to see if he wanted to join us. For some reason, he said yes. Not sure why. But, so that was my first step, and like Alan said, I've taken some more steps. But focusing on OK Connery for a minute, for those who might be watching who are just unfamiliar, like what is OK Connery? Is an Italian-produced film starring Connery, Neil Connery, Sean Connery's brother. The Bond craze of the 1960s, as I've learned, I wasn't there. I was born in 76, but as I've learned, was so huge. Everybody's rushing to do it. I mean, Bill just told us a great story about how it's exploding on television. And this Italian company comes in and says, yeah, we want to get in on this. You know, we want to make a Bond-like film, and we're going to go so far as to get the brother of Sean Connery. And in the movie, Neil Connery plays the brother of essentially James Bond. And I think that's really all you need to know. But I will tell you some more interesting things about OK Connery. Ennio Morricone was involved on the score. The score is actually not too bad. So there's a big name there. Bernard Lee is in it. Lois Maxwell is in it. Lois Maxwell with a machine gun, right, Alan? I mean, if you're going to watch...
That's all you need to know about that movie is Lois Maxwell with a machine gun. Yeah.
Lois Maxwell with a machine gun is in that movie. She's taking no prisoners. Adolfo Celli's in it. Anthony Dawson's in it. It is a menagerie of Bond actors that it's quite wonderful. The Italian film producers put money into this. In fact, it's reported that Bernard Lee and Lois Maxwell kind of got the stink eye from Broccoli and Saltzman for doing this film.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, but apparently, like, Connery got pissed off at Bernard Lee when they were filming You Only Live Twice. Like,
yes,
you dragged my brother into this.
Yes.
But he apparently, like, gave a pass to Lois Maxwell, but he dumped on Bernard Lee.
Well, you know.
And also, the movie was released by United Artists, the Bond studio.
Yes, Connery and Broccoli both gave it the stink eye. Connery reportedly turned around on it later in life, as decided that he would go more of the I'm going to support my brother route, which is nice. But yes, they both kind of gave it the stink eye. But I've also heard it reported that, like, Bernard Lee and Lois Maxwell got paid more to do OK Connery than they did in the Bond franchise.
And that's entirely possible. Because they were very poorly paid. Desmond Llewellyn as well. That's, you know, like, Bond fans say, what do you mean they weren't paid well? They weren't paid well. They were like, you know, they're only working like 2 or 3 days, whatever, on the film. It's like, it's not like today where they're like giving millions of dollars to Ralph Fiennes and a million or two to, you know, other of the supporting players. It's like Absolutely. They were, like, Broccoli and Saltzman eventually, and it took them a while, were willing to pay money to their lead Bond actor, but like these other people,
exactly. And so, I mean, you can see why they did the film, and you can see they're having fun with it too. But essentially, I will just my 2 cents on OK Connery, Operation Kid Brother. It is only for the diehard of diehard of spy fans who have to peek in every corner. If you're just a casual Bond fan, you don't need to see OK Connery, but it is a nice and interesting novelty. And I definitely recommend watching the Mystery Science Theater version, because then you can sort of laugh along with it, although it is interesting in and of itself.
I think that's the version I saw is that one. Yeah, I know I've seen it, but I couldn't remember the context. But I think that was it.
I would think that would have to be it.
I wanted to just add something real quick. The idea that they didn't get paid very much, but they kept doing the movies. I'm just thinking Lois Maxwell and Bernard Lee are like well, they're not paying us very much, but it's not like they're going to replace us and then look over and see the new Felix and go, maybe we should just take that money. That's fine.
It's a guaranteed payday, however modest it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say, actually, you said only diehard Bond fans should watch OK Connery. I would actually also say anybody who's a diehard Austin Powers fan
Yes.
wonders about where Austin Powers got a lot of the stuff from. A lot of the movies we're going to talk about feed directly into Austin Powers, and actually some of the outfits in OK Connery and some of the scenes from OK Connery are recreated 100% in the Austin Powers movies.
Also, if I may, Austin Powers stole a joke from, of all things, the Beverly Hillbillies. Now it's like the Beverly Hillbillies was like this long-running situation comedy from 1962 to 1971. It's about, Jed Clampett strikes gold. Well, actually, he was shooting at some food and got gold and got oil. Anyway, but anyway, in early '65, they did this. They did a number of episodes, but like the first one is just, you have to see it. If you're a Bond fan, you have to watch this at least once. So it's like, real quick. So you had Jed Clampett, you had his daughter Ellie, you had Granny, who was Jed's mother-in-law because he was a widower, and then you had Jethro. And Jethro was like he was the comedic center of everything. So essentially, Jethro goes to see Goldfinger, and he rushes home. And he has to tell his Uncle Jed about Goldfinger. He repeats the whole plot of Goldfinger as only Jethro can. And so at one point, as he's telling this, Uncle Jed says, "Why didn't he just shoot him?" And then Jethro has been so excited. This is, he wants to be a double knot spy. This is his life's work. And then suddenly he's double knot spy. Yes. And then he just you could just tell the air is coming out of him, but that doesn't stop him. He wants to convert their truck into a spy car, and eventually Granny gets sent up on the ejector seat that Jethro's installed. Again, just that's an aside, but that's also an example about how regular comedies of the era did Bond related episodes, and this one was, in my opinion, brilliant. But anyway, there you go. I just wanted to get that one in.
Yeah, that's cool. So that's where why didn't he just shoot him came from?
Yeah, I got a gun in my room. We can go.
Yeah.
So more than 30 years later, Austin Powers is like stealing a joke from the Beverly Hillbillies.
Well, speaking of Austin Powers, which will roll nicely into the other film, like Alan mentioned that we watched. We've started our series into the Matt Helms, starring Dean Martin. We watched The Silencers, which was the first film from 1966. And oh my gosh, did I not see a lot of where Austin Powers got some things with the circular rotating bed and a lot of his mannerisms and outfits, and just a lot of influence from these Matt Helm films.
But are you familiar with the backstory, though,
of
Matt Helm, the movies?
A bit. I'll tell you what I know.
Okay. All right.
I do know that
might be able to fill in some stuff.
I know just a cursory amount. I know that they're based on a series of novels that were actually written quite seriously. It's sort of an American version of James Bond, and they just really lightened it up. I mean, I think when you have something as explosive as James Bond in popularity and as explosive as the Rat Pack in popularity, and you mix those two, you kind of get Matt Helm. So yeah, they ended up doing four films between 66 and 68. They cranked them out pretty fast. Yeah. But that's what I know about the backstory, Bill, if you wanted to add a little.
Well, the producer of the Matt Helm films was Irving Allen, who had been Albert R. Broccoli's partner in the 50s. And he was the guy, Broccoli couldn't make it, so Allen went to this lunch or dinner meeting with Ian Fleming, and then Allen insults Fleming to his face. "Oh, your stories are terrible. They're not even good enough for TV." And it's like, what? You can only imagine what Broccoli thought when he got back to it. And so obviously after the the success of the Bond films, like, okay, here's Irving Allen with egg on his face. And so like he then starts searching for like Bond properties, and he ends up getting the Matt Helm novels, which, as you noted, were like very serious. And the Helm novels were like a mix of Ian Fleming and Mickey Spillane, because they were like first person narratives, and the first person narrative like sucks you in, and they're like, it's like really tense. And then, but I remember rereading one time, and then like about 2/3 of the way, it's like, oh, this is ridiculous. But it's like, but I'd been sucked in for like the umpteenth time reading it. But here's the thing, to make that series go, Dean Martin was a partner. So Irving Allen had to make Dean Martin a partner. If you look at the copyright notice on those films, it says Meadway, MEADWAY -Claude. Meadway was Irving Allen. Claude was Dean Martin. So Dean Martin got paid more for the silencers than Connery got paid for Thunderball, because, you know, Dean Martin got this, you know, generous percentage on the back end because he's a partner in the enterprise. And so Connery got wind of this pretty quickly. And so then Connery began agitating, I want to be a partner in the Bond series. And at that point, Broccoli and Saltzman already had a lot of disagreements. And I've argued, actually, the Matt Helm series had more of an impact on the Bond series, not because they took away box office, but because it worsened the problems going on in the Bond series at the time. And I don't mean to sound like a know-it-all, but it's something I've studied a lot.
No,
so.
I find it quite fascinating, and I appreciate you chipping in, because I am new to it. I'm sort of surface level on it. Van, you look like I'm hosting now. Van, you look like you have something to say.
I was just gonna say, I was always assuming
my job's done. I'm going. Okay, bye.
I was always assuming they just paid Dean in scotch. So I
He's drinking his profits on screen.
Also, the Matt Helm movies. The Matt Helm movies, they didn't just break the fourth wall. They demolished it. They smashed it. They like lit it on fire, because it's like in the silencers. Just one quick example: Dean Martin and Stella Stevens are like driving in Dean's
I know where you're going.
spy car, and then like they're changing the channels on the radio, and the first thing you hear is Frank Sinatra, and you know Matt Helm says, "Oh, he's terrible. Change the channel." and then she changes the channel. That's Dean Martin singing "Everybody Loves Somebody." Now that guy can sing.
Now that guy.
I mean, and that happened all the time in the Matt Helm films.
So yeah, those were my introductions to that. I have just a quick left fielder for you, Alan. I gave you a little snippet the other night. I watched a 1969 film called The Spy Killer, based on a novel by Jimmy Sangster. He wrote a few of these John Smith novels. He's a British writer. It starred Robert Horton from Wagon Train fame, Sebastian Cabot, and 2 years out from her official Bond appearance, Jill St. John. They ended up making two of these films. The next one's called Foreign Exchange. But Spy Killer and Foreign Exchange are these John Smith spy movies that are very much in, I don't have a lot to compare them to, but I've read some Lynn Dayton books. And they're taken much more serious. Like, yeah, okay, Connery, and you've got the Matt Helms. They're kind of fun. The Spy Killer and the Foreign Exchange were taken seriously. Filmed at Pinewood. A lot of Bond connection to it. Definitely neat little gem that I've just found. Like, I think I watched it night before last or something. I texted you, Alan. I was like, I watched this thing, and I thought that was rather fascinating. And since Van's gone away and he was next, I'll toss in just like build it on the Beverly Hillbillies. I recently watched an episode of The Simpsons where Homer goes to work for a megalomaniacal James Bond villain. I don't know if anybody's seen this one. I want to say it's from season 8. And he doesn't even know that he's working for a Bond villain, because the guy's super nice. And there's even a scene where Homer goes in the wrong area, and Connery is on a table with the laser coming up between his legs. I was dying. That was a hilarious. For Bond fans, you guys see, I want to say it's in season 8, episode maybe 4. I might be making that up. But yeah, Homer going to work for a James Bond villain was just hilarious. And now Van's back, and
that was actually a perfect segue for my question to Van, because I was going to ramp it up to sort of more modern times. And you just talked about animation, and the one that Van said that he wanted to talk about is Archer, which I will honestly say I have never watched an episode of. So
yes.
convince me, why should I watch Archer, Van?
Well, I want to say I have 2 more to quickly add. So let me pause. Okay, because these two occurred to me while we were talking, and we have to mention them. Okay, one is the entire Roger Moore subplot in the Cannonball Run.
Oh,
Fair
yes.
enough. Fair enough.
Yes. Yeah, I'll give you that one.
Classic film. You even get the Aston Martin, the ejector seat, but he's Simon Goldfarb Jr. He's not Roger. He's not James Bond or Roger Moore. He's Simon Goldfarb Jr. playing Roger Moore, playing James Bond.
No, he's Simon Goldfarb Jr. who believes he's Roger Moore.
That's right. And,
Yeah.
And okay.
Yeah.
Wow. It hurts my head. But yeah, he's a better Bond. I like him better as Bond in that than when he's actually playing Bond, because he does the 100% smarmy, I'm Roger Moore here. Hey, hello, darling. I love it. Anyway, the other one that has to be mentioned, because I didn't think of it because the time frame is different. We tend to think of spy things as being like 60s or later. But I've got something for you that maybe you're familiar with, that is an absolute classic of international espionage, secret agent spy stuff. I even was on a panel at DragonCon a couple of years ago in Gary and Joe's track talking about it. You guys familiar with this?
I am not, but I'm immediately interested because I see Bruce Campbell.
It's Bruce Campbell and Angela Dotchin, who is gorgeous, by the way. They are on an island in the South Pacific. Thomas Jefferson sends Bruce to be the American secret agent on this island because Napoleon is trying to take over the island as part of his world conquest. And so Bruce gets there and teams up with the British top agent there, who is Angela, and she has like fake fireplaces with artificial fire, secret lair. She's like Wai Lin from Tomorrow Never Dies on this island in the 1700s. And the two of them team up, and they're kind of like, are they in love? Are they not? They have that on again, off again, friction. And Napoleon in this thing is played by, but before I say that, the parrot is awesome. He brings secret messages to them, and he wears a little pirate outfit. The parrot does, okay?
ATAC in St. Cyril's?
Yeah,
exactly. Does he do the whole ATAC? Is it St. Cyril's?
If only. They don't have an ATAC. They have like...
Well, and supposedly that parrot was in the Avengers as well, belonging to Mrs. Peel.
Wow.
Really?
Okay.
I just heard this for the first time in like the last month.
And it has a French police chief on the island that's like the main weekly villain, but the arch villain behind it all, who only appears a few times, is Napoleon himself. And Napoleon is played by Vern Troyer Mini-Me. You can't go wrong with that.
You can't get
And see, Bruce is like the Scarlet Pimpernel type guy when he's in disguise.
if you weren't showing us the box set, I would not believe any of this.
I know. There it is. And believe it or not, it had terrible ratings and only lasted a year. But the opening theme intro sequence won an Emmy. It's that good. It has a great theme song with all these visuals going around, and it's fantastic. So yeah, you got to see Jack of All Trades. It's a little known but much beloved classic. Archer. Okay, I was on Archer from the very beginning because I heard that Comedy Central, Adult Swim, whatever, was doing a James Bond parody, and it was what's his name, Adam Reed, who's done a bunch of stuff for them, decided he wanted to do a Bond kind. I love the way he thought of it. His previous show got canceled, and so he said he went to Spain and was sitting in a big open air cafe place. He said he sat there for 3 days drinking either like cappuccino or wine or whatever, depending on what time of the day it was. And he just sat there for 3 days, I guess he went back to his hotel room at night, but he sat there for 3 days just looking around thinking. And he said he started looking at these gorgeous Spanish women, and he's like, they'd come and sit down at tables around him, and he want to go up and talk to them, but there was like, oh, there's no way I'm talking to these women. He said these women were so beautiful that they would look at you and their expression was, yes, I know I'm gorgeous. Isn't that wacky? Isn't that funny? And they kind of wink at him and then look away. And he's like, if I were like James Bond, I would just go up and sit down and start talking to these women. And that's when it clicked. I need to do a character that would get up and go talk to these women and just sit right down with them and have a conversation. And then he built a whole little family around him. So you've got his mother played, who is basically, it's basically the James Bond M when it's Judi Dench, right? But it's it really is his mother. It's not just like the metaphorical mother in the movies. She's Mallory Archer, his actual mother, and she runs the spy agency ISIS. I kid you not, it's called ISIS because this was before ISIS became a thing in the world, you know? And they have various like secretaries and helpful agents. Lana Kane is played by Aisha Tyler, and she is awesome because she's like the one actually competent agent at the whole place. And so she and Archer have a kind of a relationship because they're both, he's competent in the sense that, like James Bond, he just always gets lucky and everything works for him. Whereas she's actually really good. And so she kind of resents that everything works out for him when she actually is competent and he's not, but he just falls into good stuff, you know? So they have a really good relationship there. And then for like 4 or 5 seasons, they were basically a James Bond spoof. And then the last few years, they kind of got tired of that. And they did an entire season where they were like Smokey and the Bandit delivering cocaine in an 18-wheeler with a black Trans Am. And they did an entire season where they were like noir LA in the 30s. And they did an entire season last year called Archer 1999, where it's retro science fiction. They're on a moon base. And now they're back to being a spy show again. They kind of did all that, and now they're back to being secret agents again. So that's my overview of Archer. I will now take questions.
I just want to pitch in and say that I love H. John Benjamin, who does the voice of Archer. I fell in love with him on Dr. Katz, Professional Therapist in Comedy Central back in the day, and it was just he's so perfect. All the voices are perfect, but they're perfect. Is just amazing. Yeah, I love the show. We could just sit here and agree for a while, or somebody else could chip in.
Well, the thing about Benjamin's voice is that they originally cast one of the supporting characters was supposed to play Archer, but he just wasn't funny enough. He was being more like, you know, Roger Moore or Sean Connery. And they said, we need somebody who, you know, the cartoon looks like he kind of looks like 1969 James Lazenby. The cartoon character looks, I think, kind of like Lazenby, but his voice is that whiny H. John Benjamin. Lana, come on. You know, he's got this entitled whiny voice that cuts against his appearance. You know, he's this suave, good-looking guy, but he's this whiny baby. And it really works, doesn't it? I mean, it produces a character that you love and just hate at the same time. You know, it's really remarkable.
Well, can I say something about Lazenby? Because I forgot about this when I was talking about Uncle. So in 1983, there was a made-for-TV movie, The Return of the Man from Uncle. And it was filmed in late 82, which was when both Octopussy and Never Say Never Again occurred. And so I've been obsessing about this. Was there one day or 2 days where all 3 of the then film Bonds were working on the same day? So I went to somebody who was on that Man from Uncle, Return of the Man from Uncle production. I said, when did Lazenby work? He filmed his scenes on 2 days, December 2nd and 3rd of 1982. And then somebody who has the call sheets for Octopussy. Yeah, Roger Moore was working on those days too. He's like filming some scenes with Louis Jourdan. What I don't know, so I can't say it definitively, was Sean Connery working on those days? Probably, because like he probably was like working most days of the production, but I don't know. But anyway, I'm guessing there were probably like 2 days like where all 3 of the first 3 film Bonds were working on the same day, playing the same character or a reasonable facsimile. But
Bill, I have a trivia question for you.
Yeah.
Because I was reading about the production of that movie in Starlog back when they were making it. They covered the Bond movies and all that. Do you remember what the original working title of The Return of the Man from Uncle was?
Well,
because I do.
What I remember is a subtitle, The 15 Years Later Affair. as the version I saw on American television was The Return of the Man from U.:, the 15 years later affair. But I don't know if that's what you're thinking of or not.
It was called The Nude Bomb.
No, that's Get Smart. That's a theatrical movie.
You got it. Yep.
In 1980, it was like a theatrical Get Smart movie, but Barbara Felton, who played 99 in the show, wasn't in it. But it was written by 3 guys, 2 of whom had actually all 3 had connections to the original series. But the Nude Bomb, I saw the Nude Bomb. I saw the Nude Bomb the night before I was married. So that's like.
But they did change that name to something else, right? They changed it to Return of Maxwell Smart or something like that.
When it was on TV, when it went on TV, they took off the Nude Bomb and they made that the title. But
because I remember it switching back and forth several times in the magazine they were talking about it.
Yeah.
All right. So I actually want to give a shout out to a couple of things that we haven't mentioned yet, which are particular favorites of mine. First is we talked about Matt Helm. I always think Matt Helm and Derek Flint together. Matt Helm, we had the same time frame, but Matt Helm, we had Dean Martin as the super spy. The 2 Flint movies, In Like Flint and A Man Like Flint, were James Coburn. And talk about Austen Powers' influence. So it's literally the phone, the phone that you get in
the
Austen
phone,
Powers.
Yes,
it's right out of Derek Flint. It's the same sound clip.
Absolutely, it is taken directly from that.
And the first movie ends where the villains actually have a giant drill that they're actually drilling into the Earth's core. Does that sound familiar? So again, but one of the coolest things I like about it is doing the reading that James Coburn was actually trained by Bruce Lee to do a lot of his own martial arts, and they pay a big thing through it that Derek Flint knows all these judo and karate and stuff.
Well, also Bruce Lee worked on The Wrecking Crew, the 4th and final Matt Helm film. He has an on-screen credit, karate advisor Bruce Lee, and I've seen stills of Bruce Lee training Sharon Tate and Nancy Kwan because they have a fight in the movie, and he's like training them. And also last year when Once Upon a Time in Hollywood came out, I saw it on the first night, the Thursday night previews. And so like the next night I went and watched, there was an episode of the FBI that was prominently featured in that film. And then also The Wrecking Crew was prominently featured. And so I'm watching The Wrecking Crew for the umpteenth time. And suddenly I realize Bruce Lee is doubling Dean Martin. And it's like, and what happened was, I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I've seen it, but like, I realized how they did it because there's like an object in the foreground that obscures Bruce Lee's face. And he's like, he launches straight up and then kicks the guy and then like lands on both feet. And like, you can't see his face, but I was like slowing it way down frame by frame. Yeah, that is Bruce Lee. It is. And anyway.
I mean, that scene from The Wrecking Crew, as you said, is very prominently. Did they restage it for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, or did they just insert it?
They did not. They just inserted it straight from the film because, Margot Robbie is like sitting in a theater. She's supposed to be Sharon Tate. She's watching herself.
That scene. Yeah.
Yeah, but the scenes are like straight from the film because here's the other thing. So like when I'm watching The Wrecking Crew, she's taking a pratfall and she's got a cap on, and like you can actually see, again, I hadn't noticed this many times before, you can actually see the shadow of the boom mic on the top of her cap. and but yeah, no, it's when in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, when Margot Robbie is watching the movie, she's watching the actual movie. It's not her.
Okay.
It's
right. Cool. So we got 10 minutes left. So I actually just want to make sure we cover this one too. This is actually a personal favorite of mine, as Jared will tell you, because I keep telling him he has to watch them. OSS 117, OSS 117. This is a French movie you can get this 5-film collection on Amazon, but they are in French with English subtitles. This actually series predates Bond, both in terms of the books and the movies. The first OSS novel, 117 novel, was published before Casino Royale, and the first OSS 117 movie came out prior to Dr. No. In terms of books, it way outranks the number of Bond books. There are 252 OSS 117 novels. The guy who created it, he wrote 88 of them and then was killed in a car crash.
Ouch.
So his wife took over and wrote another 145 novels. And then when she retired, her daughter and son-in-law took over and they wrote like another 25. So there's like this whole OSS 1. In terms of movies, there's not been as many as Bond. There has been, I'm just doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. But the interesting thing is they start off the book like the books themselves. The books are serious noir spy thrillers. The movies start off like that. The first one in this collection is actually in black and white. It's very laid back, very noir, French style, very serious. But as they get into the 60s, they get a little bit more influenced by the Bond movies. And in fact, the last one on here, OSS 117 Double Agent, actually stars somebody who would go on to be cast as James Bond. It stars John Gavin, who was cast as James Bond for Diamonds Are Forever before Connery decided he was coming back. So he's the guy who got cast as Bond, paid as Bond, but never actually played Bond. And they actually reckon that his performance as OSS 117 is one of the reasons that he got cast as Bond. And you can see it, he definitely has the physicality. It actually also stars Kurt Jurgens, years before he was cast as a Bond villain. And going back to this sort of OK Connery thing of we need to bring in Bond things, it has Luciana Paluzzi as the femme fatale in this movie as well. So you have the Bond girl connection. They're good fun. But more recently, in 2006, they actually restarted the series as a straight out pastiche spoof of the 1960s style Euro spy Bond movies. So the early ones are pretty serious, noir. Like I say, they get a little bit more crazy as you get into the 60s, but they don't go right out Austen Powers. But the more recent ones, which starts off with Cairo Nest of Spies, I think was 2006. So around the same time as the Casino Royale reboot, they rebooted OSS 117 as outrageous parodies. And the interesting thing is OSS 117 is actually an American agent who always happens to end up doing operations in either France or Spain or somewhere in Europe. The reason he speaks French is because he's from New Orleans and he's Louisiana. He never has a Louisiana accent, but that's the reason he can speak French. But in the recent reboots, they actually moved him to being a French secret agent. I love them. They're very stylized, but they're good fun. And it's a very interesting progression to see them go from the noir to the serious to the outright spoof in the more recent ones. And the cinematography and the production values in the more recent ones are outstanding. They really evoke that 1960s look and feel of the classic Connery movies.
Well, I mentioned this before. So one of the stars in that series was Frederick Stafford.
Correct.
And he starred in Topaz, which was an Alfred Hitchcock directed straight spy thriller in 1969. It's an interesting movie. I actually like it a lot, but it has one of the weirdest Hitchcock cameos ever, where it's a scene in an airport and Hitchcock is in a wheelchair and suddenly he gets up and he shakes somebody's hand and walks off. It's like, what is this for? Well, it's probably Hitch's ego, probably, but who knows? But it's a very good thing. But Topaz has 3 separate endings, and I've seen 2 of them because I saw it for the first time on NBC in the late 60s, early 70s, and then I saw a separate ending when it was on TCM, a movie channel in the U.S., sometime in the last 10 years. So it's apparently it's a weird film, but that's the tie to OSS 117 that I know about.
Cool. Actually, you just reminded me one little OSS 117 fact I was going to mention is you just mentioned they often recast the lead. Some of the time they'd never mentioned it at all. Like the Bond movies, it was just another guy playing the same part. But a couple of times, and noticeably with the John Gavin one, they actually made mention of it, and they said he'd had plastic surgery to fool his enemies, which is why he now looked completely different, which I believe is something they actually considered with the Connery laser switch.
Well, they consider it with mattresses.
Yeah.
They did toss out the idea that, oh, Bond needs to like fool his enemies so he'll get plastic surgery. Thankfully, they threw that idea out, but yeah, they did think about it.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, this was actually the Gavin one was actually filmed around the same time that Majesties were filming, so it was sort of in the ether, I guess, as an idea. So cool. So we have about 5 minutes left. Let's just do a quick round the horn wrap up of sort of quick question around just the general expansion of the super spy genre. Sort of, do you think it's something that if you're a Bond fan or a fan of Man from U.N.C.L.E. that you should go look further and see what else is out there? What do you think, Bill?
Absolutely. You should check everything out. It's like, especially the 60s stuff, because again, I said this earlier, it's like in the 60s, there was a lot of catching lightning in a bottle. In addition, you had Mission Impossible, beyond the examples I mentioned, Mission Impossible. You had this one short-lived show set in World War II, a World War II spy called The Blue Light with Robert Goulet. There's tons of great stuff out there, and it's like, it's all worth checking out if you can find it.
Cool. Van, what's your feelings? Is this something worth exploring?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I feel like that several of these things I actually saw before I ever really saw or understood I was watching James Bond as like a thing, because I remember the Dean Martin movies we were talking about, and I remember the James Coburn movies, and I think the Dean Martin was kind of like gently as a little kid got me into the spy genre before I made my transition into Connery and Roger Moore.
I thought you were going to say they got you. I was going to say I thought you were going to say they got you into drinking scotch as a kid.
Well, that's what Dean certainly did. Although Dean always had apple juice, a weird thing. But the other one, there was a Robert Conrad show I remember on NBC that was very much James Bond similar too. That was
A Man Called Sloan, 1979.
Okay. Yeah, I can't remember what it's called, but that was another one.
You can get the soundtrack now. It's part of a Streets of San Francisco soundtrack. But yes,
okay,
just came out last couple of months. Sorry,
Jared, what's
Oh, I would definitely recommend it. Even though I'm new to it, I find it to be fun, exciting. You can see how things influence others. I can't believe I forgot to mention that Daniela Bianchi is in OK Connery, because she's like the most gorgeous woman who ever lived. And and also talking about another thing that occurred to me was talking about Derek Flint and the Austen Powers. There was a point in one of the Austen Powers movies where he said that Flint was his favorite movie.
Yeah.
He actually says, Austin Powers says, Derek Flint's my favorite movie, man, which I thought was funny. But no, to answer your question, I think people should definitely check these out, expand their horizons, make some connections, and just have some fun with them. Yeah, we talked a lot about 60s and the modern era with Archer. Can't believe Van didn't bring up Remington Steele, but hey, I wound him up. I wound him up right at the end.
In Our Man Flint, there's one scene where Lee J. Cobb is like trying to give James Coburn like a briefcase, and it's like there's 45 gadgets in this, and James Coburn takes out his cigarette lighter, says there are 82 devices in this, and then he flicks the flame. He says 83 if you want to light a cigar.
Yeah, great scene. All right, so we only have a minute or so left, so let's just go around the horn. Where can people find you online if they want to get in touch, find out more about this stuff, or just have a general conversation around cool spy stuff? Bill, where can folks find you?
The Spy Command is at hmssweblog.wordpress.com.
Cool. And I also believe you're on Twitter at the Spy Command, yes?
At the Spy Command, yes.
Okay. Van?
I'm at www.plexico.net, and the On Her Majesty's Secret podcast that we're all on is at secretpodcast.podbean.com.
And Jared?
I'm at Yard Sale Artist, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Parler, and YouTube. It's all Yard Sale Artist. And since Van covered Honor Majesty's Secret Podcast. I'll just remind you can find me on the Longbox Crusade Podcast Network as well. Alan.
And you can find me for Bond-related stuff at Bond Lexicon on Twitter, or for Uncle-related stuff at Uncle Lexicon on Twitter. And you can find me at jamesbondlexicon.online for the website, and on the aforementioned Honor Majesty's Secret Podcast. So with that, thank you, guys. I think we're right on time. Appreciate you joining the panel, and really enjoyed the conversation. And I've got a few more things to go find and put into the DVD player or download or whatever the kids do these days to watch movies. So, Jack, yeah, it's on the list, man. It's on the list. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yes.
Bye.